Hey everyone, so you're gearing up for the Pennsylvania Pre-K 4 exam. You've come to the right place. We're going to break down the absolute must-knows of child development and learning. All right, let's jump right in.
It's a huge question, isn't it? You might think it's some kind of magic, or that some people are just born to do it. But honestly, building a great teacher and a great classroom is way more structured than you'd imagine.
And that's really the big idea for this whole explainer. All these theories, developmental milestones, and assessment strategies, they aren't just things to memorize for a test. They are your blueprint. They are the plans you'll use to build a classroom that's effective, supportive, and truly alive with learning.
You know, every solid building needs a rock-solid foundation. For us as teachers, that foundation is understanding the big ideas, the core theories of how kids actually learn. So let's start with a few of the giants in the field.
First up, we've got Jean Piaget. The key takeaway for him is that he saw kids as these little scientists, actively figuring out the world through very distinct, predictable stages. For the pre-K to fourth grade world, you're mostly living in his pre-operational and concrete operational stages. This is that amazing journey from thinking that's really symbolic and kind of all about me, to developing more logical, organized thought about the real world right in front of them.
Then you have Vygotsky, and he kind of flips the script. While Piaget saw the little scientist working alone, Vygotsky said, no way, learning is social. He gave us two concepts you absolutely have to know for the exam. First, the zone of proximal development. That's the sweet spot between what a kid can do all by themselves and what they can do with a little help. And that help, that's the second concept, scaffolding. It's the support we give them to reach that next level.
And Maslow brings us right back down to the most fundamental truth of any classroom. His famous hierarchy of needs is so important. It basically tells us you cannot teach a child who is hungry, or who feels unsafe, or who feels like they just don't belong. Those basic needs have to come first. So creating that safe, warm, welcoming classroom, that's not just a nice thing to do, it's the absolute prerequisite for any learning to happen. Okay, so let's put a few of these theories side by side really quickly. The constructivist idea, that's where kids are building their own knowledge from their experiences. It's why project-based learning is so powerful. Behaviorist theory is all about learning as a response. Think sticker charts and positive reinforcement. And social cognitive theory, that's all about learning by watching others. Every time you model how to solve a problem on the board, that's exactly what you're doing.
All right, so now that we have our theoretical blueprint, let's talk about our building materials, the children themselves. You've got to understand their developmental journey to actually use these theories in the right way.
Just look at this progression in language. I mean, it is an incredible journey. You go from a preschooler stringing together 3 or 4 words all the way to a 4th grader who can read chapter books and write a whole essay. Knowing these milestones is crucial. It helps you know what's typical and, just as importantly, spot when a student might be falling behind and needs some extra help.
And of course, this development is happening all over. Cognitively, they're shifting from a world that revolves completely around them to one where they can start to apply actual logic. And physically, their gross motor skills, running, jumping, climbing, get so much more coordinated. At the same time, their fine motor skills go from that clumsy way they first hold scissors to having the precise control needed for neat handwriting.
And this is arguably the most important of all. Socially, kids move from just playing next to each other to actually navigating the super complex world of friendships and empathy. And emotionally, they grow from just being able to say, I'm sad, to actually learning how to manage those big, overwhelming feelings. It is a massive period of personal growth. Okay, now we get to the really practical part. How do we take this blueprint and these building blocks and actually construct a classroom that works for every single student? This is all about inclusion.
So one of the key frameworks you'll definitely see on the exam is RTI, or Response to Intervention. The easiest way to think about it is as a pyramid of support. Tier 1 is that strong, wide base. That's just excellent, high-quality teaching for everybody. If some students are still struggling, they move to Tier 2 for more targeted, small group help. And Tier 3, that's the very top of the pyramid. That's for the few students who need that really intensive one-on-one support.
Okay, listen up, because this distinction is critical, and you have to know it. An accommodation changes how a student learns. Think of it as leveling the playing field. A modification, on the other hand, changes what a student is expected to learn. That's changing the game itself. So giving a student extra time on a test, that's an accommodation. Giving them a completely different, simpler test, that's a modification. And here are some real-world examples of what those accommodations look like in practice. It's really important to remember that many of these aren't just good ideas. They're legally required under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, or IDEA. Whether it's more time, an audiobook, or a quiet room for a test, the goal is always the same. Remove the barriers so every student gets a fair shot.
And when we're supporting our English language learners, our strategies have to be super intentional. Using visuals is huge. A picture can explain what 1,000 words can't. Scaffolding their language, like giving them sentence starters, provides that structure they need to jump into the conversation. And of course, bringing their home cultures into the classroom, that makes them feel seen, valued, and ready to learn.
So, you've laid the foundation, you put up the walls, you've made it inclusive. What's the final step? The inspection. How do we know if any of this is actually working? How do we measure student growth and guide them forward? That's where assessment comes in.
With assessment, timing is everything. A diagnostic test happens before you teach. You use it to figure out what students already know or don't know. Formative assessments happen during teaching. Think of a quick exit ticket. It's your way of checking for understanding so you can adjust your plan for tomorrow. And finally, summative assessments happen after a unit is over, like a final project or a chapter test, to evaluate the learning that took place.
Now let's break down two big types of summative tests. First, a norm reference test. This test answers one question: how did this student do compared to everybody else? This is where you get those percentile rankings. It's all about comparing one student's performance to a larger norm group.
Then you have a criterion referenced test. This answers a totally different question. Did my student master the material? The absolute best analogy for this is a driving test, right? It doesn't matter if you were the best or worst driver on the road that day. The only thing that matters is if you met the specific criteria. You stopped at the stop sign, you parallel parked. It's all about mastering a standard, not about comparing yourself to others. And finally, we have to talk about our professional ethics. Using assessments comes with a huge responsibility. We have to make sure our tests are fair and not biased against any group of students. We have to keep their data private and confidential, and we have to provide all those necessary accommodations. This isn't just about being a good teacher. It's our ethical and, in many cases, our legal duty.
So there you have it. That's the core of the blueprint. The theories, the developmental stages, the strategies for inclusion, and the tools for assessment. But remember, this knowledge isn't just about passing a test. It is the toolkit you are going to use every single day to build something truly incredible for your students. So, now that you have the blueprint, what are you going to build?